Good morning. Welcome to a fresh edition of your breakfast show, Leadership Television Inside Nigeria. Today is Monday, 16th of February, 2026. And of course, this weekend, I hope you had a swell time, of course, celebrating Valentine's, which was on Saturday. However, we are back to work this Monday morning, the first day of the working week. And of course, today's show, we're looking at what the national papers are saying, starting with Nigeria's most influential newspaper, Leadership. Leadership had its conference and award ceremony Thursday last week. Leadership's leading story today says, and is also the sole leading story on the cover. 2027 APC Governor Steve Uzodinma, the Imo State Governor, as next Senate President. That story continues on page 4 of Leadership. There's already permutations in the air for next year's 2027 election, and the Leadership says APC Governors tip Uzodinma as next Senate President. Let's take some excerpts from that leading story, which runs on page 4 of Leadership. Ahead of the World Congresses of the ruling All Progressives Congress APC, governors have commenced a covert move to take total control of the party structures nationwide. The move, it was gathered, is aimed at laying a solid foundation for the control of the party machinery, preparatory to the installation of the chairman of the Progressives Governors Forum and Imo State Governor Hope Uzodinma as the next president of the 11th Senate of the Federal Republic. The objective, it was gathered, is the control of the 11th Senate upon its inauguration in June 2027. Of course, the presidential and the legislative elections, according to INEC's timetable, is going to take place February 20, 2027. Which is next year. Uzodinma, who was elected to a second term in office in November 2023, it was learned plans to pick the senatorial nomination form as a sitting governor, since the law does not bar him from contesting any position while in office. The source, who said deliberations on the plan were still unfolding, stated that the option available to the governor is to resign as governor and focus on securing the Senate's presidency with the backing of his colleagues if he wins the senatorial race. The source, however, noted that the plan will depend largely on the president's endorsement and on allowing the governors to determine the leadership of the next National Assembly. But Uzodinma, in response to inquiries from Leadership, said that although he was not aware of the moves by his colleagues, he received the prophecy of becoming the next Senate President with an open mind. We just took some excerpts from Leadership's sole leading story on its cover this Monday, February 16, 2026, which is 2027 APC Governor Steve Uzodinma as next Senate President. We move ahead to the page 3 of Leadership, where we have our stand. Today's stand is on Kwara massacre and intelligence failure. Kwara massacre and intelligence failure. But we'll also take some excerpts from today's stand in Leadership. 162 people are dead, slaughtered in their own homes, in their own village by extremists who had announced their intentions months in advance. The massacre of residents of Woro and Nuku communities in Kayama local government area of Kwara State recently is a damning indictment of a security apparatus that, despite repeated warnings, failed to prevent a tragedy that was practically advertised. Let us be clear about what happened. Jihadist militants, whether affiliated with Boko Haram or the Islamic State-linked Lakurawa faction, rode into these villages on motorbikes armed with AK-47 rifles, explosives, and pump-action weapons. They surrounded the communities, blocked exits, and for nearly 10 hours carried out a systematic execution of men, women, and children whose only offense was refusing to submit to a perverted interpretation of their own faith. The attackers moved door to door. And from that excerpt, we also take a stand inside today's stand. It says the courage of the Woro and Nuku residents deserves recognition. These were Muslim communities that refused to be conscripted into an extremist ideology, choosing instead to practice their faith peacefully. They pay for that refusal with their lives. Nigeria cannot continue to fight terrorism with post-massacre military deployments and strongly worded presidential statements. The country needs a security architecture that treats credible threats with the urgency they demand. One where a 5-month warning from a terrorist group results in sustained military presence, not a temporary deployment that melts away when attention shifts. Those were excerpts from today's stand in leadership, our stand, Kwara massacre and intelligence failure. We move to the third page we normally review every day on this program, and that is the back page of leadership. Today's Monday column with Joshua Ochegja is writing on the knife and yam. The knife and yam. We'll take quotes from that Monday column. Before 2023, Tinubu made his yams available for every politician who wanted a slice. He has his bands widely spread across the country. It is rumored that there is no relevant northern politician who hasn't sliced from his yams, whether in APC, PDP, or the ADC. The politics of religion was demystified in 2023. In the annals of our democratic experience, Tinubu is the first to achieve this feat at the presidential level. He ran a Muslim ticket. It was a case of political correctness as opposed to religious correctness. The 1993 Abiola Kingbe attempt was truncated. Tinubu was Abiola's protege. We just took quotes from today's column, Monday column with Joshua Ucheja, the knife and yam in quote. Before we leave the back page, we visit Ghana Must Go. On the news, El-Rufai accuses Ribadu of procuring dangerous toxic chemicals from Poland. And Ghana Must Go is asking Malam Nancy El-Rufai, are you sure? Are you sure, Malam Nancy El-Rufai? Well, it's on this note we conclude review of Leadership newspaper this Monday. For more, log into the website of Leadership, www.leadership.ng. From Leadership, we'll review his sister publication, which is National Economy. It's a weekly business newspaper. It's actually an insight in Monday's Leadership. Leading story on today's National Economy says Blue Economy, Nigeria's 1 trillion naira revenue potential hampered by persistent hurdles. Blue Economy, Nigeria's 1 trillion naira revenue potential hampered by persistent hurdles. Experts blame revenue leakages, weak coordination, lack of technical sovereignty, industrial underdevelopment, among others. Kicker to that leading story on today's National Economy, Blue Economy, Nigeria's 1 trillion naira revenue potential hampered by persistent hurdles. Although the story continues on the cover, it also continues inside pages. Growing foreign reserves marks turnaround for Nigeria's economy, coming from economist. CBN, West African banks finalize 2027 eco currency launch. CBN, West African banks finalize 2027 eco currency launch. Business owners call for policy support amid economic hardship. These are the stories gracing this week's cover story on the cover of National Economy. For more, log into the website of National Economy, www.nationaleconomy.com. From National Economy, we move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup this Monday, and that paper is also talking politics. It says Blueprint. Blueprint says 2027 general elections, INEC consults over Ramadan overlap. National Assembly hosts emergency section Tuesday. Leading story on today's Blueprint newspaper, 2027 general elections, INEC consults over Ramadan overlap. National Assembly hosts emergency section Tuesday, that is tomorrow. And commission say we are sensitive to all legitimate concerns is a rider underneath that leading story. Terrorism, U.S. delivers military supplies to Nigeria. Udume haze as troops full attack on Puka. Again, Kano Single Market raised 7 kids, 5 billion naira property destroyed. Tinubu orders probe Governor Yusuf visits Sin. We have the picture of the Single Market, which was raised yesterday, and 7 kids, 5 billion naira property destroyed. Still on Blueprint newspaper, we move ahead. Okay, that's all we can take on the review of Blueprint newspaper this Monday. For more, log into the website of Blueprint newspaper, www.blueprint.ng. From Blueprint newspaper, we move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that paper is also still talking 2027 politics. Is Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard says Electoral Act harmonization, reps under pressure to abandon compulsory e-transmission of results. That is a developing story, because as at last week, the Senate has already set up a committee to meet with a House of Reps committee to harmonize the two reports on Electoral Bill amendment. And today's Vanguard says Electoral Act harmonization reps under pressure to abandon compulsory e-transmission of results. The leading story continues on page 5. However, we have riders underneath that leading story. Empirical data guided our decision. Senate insists real-time electronic transmission of election results not practicable now. Another need that while most NAS members may lose seats in 2027, coming from Igini, former rep of INEC, while most most National Assembly members may lose seats in 2027. 2027, Obi formally declares for ADC, vows to defy ballot rigging. El-Rufai Ribadu Bika over alleged importation of poisonous substance. Daily petrol imports declined by 42.2% to 24.8 million liters. That story is on page 22 of Vanguard. Daily petrol imports declined by 42.2% to 24.8 million liters. Federal government spends 26 billion naira on moribund Ajaokuta Steel Company. The story is on page 21 of Vanguard as we head up to the story above the masthead of Vanguard. We communicate movement of terrorists to security agencies. Bets. That is coming from Zamfara State Governor. We communicate movement of terrorists to security agencies. Bet says terrorists can be defeated if discusses massive infrastructure achievements. Reveals how state IGRO moved from 90 million naira to over 5 billion naira in 30 months. The story continues on page 12 of Vanguard newspaper. And for more, you log into the website of Vanguard, www.vanguardngr.com. From Vanguard newspaper, we move to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Daily Sun. Daily Sun is also still on the developing story of electricity. It says Labour furious over 3 trillion naira bailout plans for power. Labour furious over 3 trillion naira bailout plans for power. Of course, federal government said it was going to share the bailout funds with state governments. Claims money moved to settle the boys ahead of 2027. Demands reversal of privatization. Insisting on real-time transmission will plunge Nigeria into a crisis, Senate insists. ADC knocks Tinubu for attending fishing festival amid escalating terror attacks. Says 1,300 Nigerians reportedly killed in last 41 days. Cross River listed as oil producing state as federal government's interagency committee submits report to ROMAFC. 5 killed, 4 injured in Ebonyi mining collapse. And that takes us to the stories just been neat and beside the masthead of Daily Sun newspaper. 2023 mistake won't repeat in 2027, coming from Labour Party presidential aspirant in 2023, Peter Obi. Step down for Tinubu, it is not Southeast turn, Umahi replies Peter Obi. The last story gracing the cover of Daily Sun this Monday, recapitalization. Banks rush to finalize major acquisition details as CBN's March 31 deadline. Yes, and that also concludes review of front headline stories on Daily Sun newspaper this Monday. For more, log into www.thesun.ng. From the Sun, we move to the last paper we have on our lineup for review this Monday, and that is The Guardian. The Guardian says port users pay more as NCS recreates multiple forest regime at 7% margin. Port users pay more as Nigerian Customs recreates multiple forest regime at 7% margin. The illustration beneath that story says Nigerian Customs has left the exchange rate for assessing tariffs and other charges at 1,451.6 naira per dollar, a band that is 98.8 naira above the spot rate and nearly a 100 naira premium on the weekly average official rate. Afenifere raises alarm over persistent terror attacks, abductions. That story is on page 7 of The Guardian. CPPE decries decries 10 trillion naira yearly loss by MSMEs to employee corruption fraud. AU Summit, Nigeria backs reforms, regional security measures. Kwara governor under fire for campaigning white terrorist raid community. That story is on page 9 of The Guardian. Kwara governor under fire for campaigning white terrorist raid community. Mixed reactions trade reported U.S. troops arrival amid fresh attacks. Tax Act, Presidency force Amechi's claim on 25% bank deduction rule. NLC alleges federal government planning to settle the boys with 3 trillion naira electricity subsidy. NLC, Nigerian Labour Congress, alleges federal government planning to settle the boys in court with 3 trillion naira electricity subsidy. Data shows 10-year capital funding gap in health sector. And lastly, on the cover of The Guardian, PMS supply hits 63 million liters per day as consumption falls to 60.2 million naira in January. Don't forget to log into the website of The Guardian for continuation of these headline stories this Monday, February 16, 2026, www.guardian.ng. Well, viewers, it's on that note we've come to the end of today's program, Inside Nigeria, your breakfast show on Leadership Television. Don't forget to join us tomorrow, same time, same station, for another fresh edition of the program. My name is Winifred Weber once again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word. Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080